Hello there, people of the internet. I have been asked by a couple of people to go ahead and make some more content on the M1 Carbine, however it is that you want to pronounce it. Of course, you guys are correct, and I am completely incorrect. I've already made several videos on the M1 Carbine before, so I guess I'm just going to go ahead and wing it and repeat everything it is that I've already said. We got bugs cricking in the background. We got dogs barking in the background. This is Florida. Welcome to the Florida lifestyle. I figure I'll go ahead and I'll cover the history and development of the M1 Carbine along with the cartridge itself. Let's go ahead and talk about the cartridge itself. This right here is the 30 caliber carbine cartridge. Military production would not be a soft point round, but this is what I have. It's a soft point round because I actually use my M1 Carbine for hunting purposes. Serves me great whenever I'm hunting in the jungles of Florida, which you can clearly see behind me. Very thick stuff, and I never really make shots beyond 50 yards, let alone 100 yards, let alone the 300 yards that this right here was intended to be capable out to. So the M1 Carbine projectile is a 110 grain bullet that's going to travel just under 2,000 feet per second. At the muzzle, out to about 200-ish so yards, you're going to have very similar capabilities to the 223 30 caliber carbine compared to a 62 grain 223. At the muzzle, the 62 grain 223 or 62 grain 5.56 is going to have just over 1,000 foot-pounds of energy of force, whereas your 110 bullets from your M1 Carbine traveling at 2,000-ish feet per second is going to be about 950 foot-pounds of energy. So at the muzzle, they're going to be incredibly similar. As you approach that 200-yard mark, you're going to see greater and greater differences between the two cartridges. As a matter of fact, once you hit that 200-yard mark, you're going to see about a double energy impact in comparison to the 62 grain 223 and the 30 caliber carbine. That's just the nature of the beast. You have an intermediate rifle cartridge versus essentially a handgun cartridge. Now, that being said, the 950-ish approximately foot-pounds that the M1 Carbine is going to have is going to be quite a significant amount of force in comparison to what most people claim the M1 Carbine is capable of. Many people will tell me, I'm sure we can go browse the comments and find them right now, many people will tell me that the M1 Carbine is completely anemic and underpowered, and if you wear a heavy jacket, then you will basically be able to deflect the bullet no problem. Well, the M1 Carbine at 100 yards has about the same energy transfer as a 357 Magnum at the muzzle, so the M1 Carbine is definitely far from an anemic cartridge. However, the M1 Carbine is also not designed to be a long-range cartridge. It was intended to be effective out to about 300 yards. Now we're going to go ahead and dive into the history. In 1938, the United States Ordnance Department ended up letting out a request for a lightweight carbine to kind of substitute or supplement the 1911 for people who were on the front lines and needed something a little bit more effective at long ranges than your 45 ACP 1911. For the most part, your conscripts that weren't necessarily all that trained weren't really all that effective with the 1911 out beyond, say, 25 yards or so. I know people who can nail things at 100 yards with a 1911, but not only am I not one of them, but most people are not one of them. However, nailing something at 100 yards with a carbine is significantly easier because a carbine, you have 3 points of contact, one on your shoulder, and then you got your arms, and then you got your cheek right there on the side of the stock. So you have multiple points of contact as opposed to a handgun, which you just kind of hold inside your hand and try to stabilize the best that you can. So it is significantly easier to make long-range shots with a carbine. The carbine was not meant to see any sort of frontline service. It was not meant to be a frontline use rifle. However, intentions are not always what happens. In 1941, the United States actually adopted the M1 Carbine, and not long after that, it very much saw frontline use with the adoption by officers, sergeants, people that weren't necessarily going to be needing a full power rifle like the M1 Grand, people that were like paratroopers who wanted something a little bit lighter, a little bit handier weight. As a matter of fact, there were multiple versions of the M1 Carbine that were played with that had a folding stock on them to go ahead and try to give the paratroopers as compact of a firearm as possible without just sending them into combat with a handgun. The M1 Carbine saw regular use on the front line from 1941 with its adoption, more likely 1942 to 1945 up to the end of the World War, and the end of that World War, and then after that it saw regular use in Korea, and it even saw limited use in Vietnam. There were experimental versions of the M2 Carbine that came out and even did see limited use. The M2 Carbine was essentially an M1 Carbine that was select fire, so you could make it go full auto, versus the M1 Carbine, which was always intended to be a semi-automatic design. Many people are going to go into the comments and they're going to talk about Carbine Williams and how he designed this thing while he was in prison. I will let you guys argue the validity of that down in the comments. I have learned the absolute, what would you call it? Well, no matter what I say, people are not going to listen whenever it comes to that topic, and there's a huge divide as to what people believe actually happened. I do know that there was a lot of intention with this thing not being adopted by the various designers, not just William Carbines or Carbine Williams or whatever his name was. There were multiple designers, and they were not intending this carbine to actually be adopted by United States Military Services. But guess what? The carbine was in fact adopted by United States Military Services, and it was very much mass-produced. I believe that there were 7 million of these made during the World War II proceedings. So actually, during the prototype eras, during the prototype testing eras of this M1 Carbine, there was actually an issue where one of the bolts for the carbine had broken, and one of the designers had to go through and remake another bolt specifically based off of his memory of the design, and he managed to get that bolt back into the carbine to resume testing before any real issues came about that. And next thing we know, we have the adoption of the M1 Carbine. There is a lot of reminiscent similarities between the M1 Carbine system and the M1 Garand system. However it is that you want to pronounce that, of course you are right and I am wrong. The M1 Carbine system has your exposed, I'm going to use that word, exposed bolt. It has your rotating bolt system, but other than a similar, I'm going to use the word resemblance. Other than a similar resemblance to the M1 Garand, there's not really much else that is familiar or that is really all that similar to that system. The M1 Carbine actually operates off of a gas-tappet system as opposed to the M1 Garand's gas piston operating system. Not only that, but the M1 Carbine actually takes external magazines as opposed to the M1 Garand's, what do you call those? In-block clips. Besides that, they both have aperture sights, so the sight pictures are going to be incredibly similar. The M1 Carbine has almost double the capacity. If we're talking about the standard capacity, 15-round magazines, though you can get 30-round extended magazines for the M1 Carbine if you feel like. 15 rounds is the normal capacity. It is a double-stack, double-feed magazine, very similar to some of the other rifles that we are familiar with today. I think I've covered basically everything I can with the M1 Carbine, from history, from the cartridge, from as much as I can. So now, all of that being said, I'm going to go ahead and fire a couple of these round nose rounds at downrange. These are 110 grain projectiles. They should be traveling at about that 2,000 foot per second mark. I did have more ammunition out here, but actually while I was out here I had to deal with a critter, so I have less ammunition than I intended, but that's alright. This particular M1 Carbine has issues that I am still trying to remediate, which is why we have duct tape on our magazine. But with those issues comes a difficulty with extraction and ejection, which I'm currently working on, and I'm sure I'll get a billion different solutions on how I can fix that. But that's not going to stop me from sending a couple of rounds of M1 Carbine downrange. This right here, wow, did we actually cycle? We actually cycled. This right here is an incredibly delightfully light shooting cartridge with an incredibly delightfully lightweight carbine. This would make a fantastic system for carrying around, especially for long distances. As a matter of fact, this right here is one of my preferences for hunting here in Florida, because I will wander for miles and miles and miles through thick jungles and whatnot, and I won't really shoot beyond 100 yards, which is what makes this right here such a good option, because it's incredibly lightweight, incredibly light recoiling, but boy, it still packs a punch out to some pretty significant distances, especially because I don't really fire at significant distances. All right, I got one more round here. Did we cycle? Oh, he did. Would you look at that? Like I said, I did have more ammunition to go ahead and send down range, but I had to take care of something. So all of this being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed my little video on the M1 Carbine. I don't really have anything else to add to it. You guys already know the history. You already know the cartridge. And there's a ton of myths out there as to it being underpowered, and a ton of myths out there as to it being way more powerful than it actually is. Many people in the comments will tell me that it was intended to be used as a brush gun for like Vietnam and whatnot, despite the fact that it came, you know, some 20 years before the Vietnam War was ever even beginning to be a thing. But we have a very lightweight projectile not going very quickly through brush like that. It is not going to hold up very well in something like that. If you want yourself a brush gun, you want a large, fat diameter, heavy projectile that is designed to really hold itself together. Something like a 45-70 would be a much better brush gun going through stuff like this than the M1 Carbine. All this being said, I think I have beat this horse into ad nauseum. So thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I will see you guys on the next episode. Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Gary. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.